Hello there, in this video I'll be taking a look at what a Senate red wave might look like this November, and there are a few reasons to think a red wave is possible even if it's unlikely at the moment. In 2020, the polls did tend to overestimate Democrats. Biden's performance in particular was overestimated in most swing states. There is some historical precedent, like 2014, for a Republican generic ballot surge within 2 months of an election. There are some people talking about this like it's inevitable, but I think it's more unlikely than not. In the polls, even the ones with Democrats in the lead are pretty close, often within the margin of error. Let's start out west with Nevada. The latest polls show an extremely tight race between Catherine Cortez Masto and Republican Adam Laxalt. Cortez Masto has a pretty significant fundraising edge, and there's been a ton of money spent opposing and supporting both candidates. Last week, the Senate Leadership Fund, a super PAC aligned with Mitch McConnell, spent about $2 million in Nevada. This is absolutely a winnable race for the GOP, and if there's a red wave, they will pick it up. Let's move down to Arizona, where most reliable pollsters show Kelly with a narrow lead. Some bad pollsters show Kelly up by double digits. Toss those in the trash. The GOP doesn't appear to be too confident in Masters. In fact, the Senate Leadership Fund has pulled funding out of the Arizona race. But I guess considering he doesn't have much institutional support from the GOP, Masters is performing pretty well against a popular incumbent. Some election forecasters have this race as a true toss-up, and I think it's definitely a state the GOP could flip in 2022. Maybe if Masters continues to poll well, Republican super PACs will jump back in the race. In Colorado, Republican Joe O'Dea is challenging incumbent Michael Bennet. The latest polls, even ones from Republican firms, show Bennet ahead. Outside groups are spending 4 times more money opposing O'Dea than they are supporting him. Colorado has been trending blue, and even in a red wave year, I really don't see the GOP pulling out Colorado. In Wisconsin, the polls show incumbent Republican Ron Johnson and Democrat Mandela Barnes in a dead heat. But when we look back at 2020, Wisconsin was one of those states where Democrats were most overestimated. Ron Johnson also has a massive fundraising edge. Even in a neutral environment, I do think Johnson is the favorite in Wisconsin. Ohio, that's another state that really overestimated Biden in 2020. The latest polls show Vance up by a narrow margin over Democrat Tim Ryan. The Senate Leadership Fund has spent more than they expected they had to in Ohio, but they've been spending big, $28 million. I don't find Vance to be a very impressive candidate, but Ohio is turning Republican, and it's a seat they should probably win even in a neutral environment. Let's head east over to New Hampshire. Incumbent Democrat Maggie Hassan faces Republican Donald Bolduc. The latest polls show Hassan up by 3 to 13 points. In 2020, the polls overestimated Biden's support by about 4% in New Hampshire. Interestingly, right after winning the primary, Bolduc walked back his claim that the election in 2020 was stolen. While unlikely, I do think Bolduc could pull off a victory here, especially if those polls showing the race around a 3% lead for Hassan are the ones that are more accurate, and that's really not something I would have predicted even a few weeks ago. In Pennsylvania, Republican Mehmet Oz is running a mediocre campaign against John Fetterman, and despite that, the race has actually tightened up over the past week or so. The 2 most recent polls show Fetterman only up by about 2 to 5%. Echelon Insights has Fetterman plus 21, which is just ridiculous. It's totally off. Ignore that poll. The candidates have spent a similar amount of money, but outside spending has gone heavily against Oz. It's important to point out here, though, that we don't have Q3 reporting from the Fetterman campaign yet. The polls overestimated Biden by about 3 points in Pennsylvania in 2020, so is it possible for Oz to win? I think it is, even though I think Fetterman is the favorite right now. In North Carolina, Republican Ted Budd faces Democrat Sherry Beasley. Polls show a very close race here. Beasley has outraised and outspent Budd, but outside spending has heavily been in Budd's favor. North Carolina has been trending Republican for the last few cycles now, and even in a neutral environment, I think it's a seat the Republicans should win. In Georgia, the last 3 polls show a very close race between Herschel Walker and Raphael Warnock. There's a debate coming up in a few weeks that could have a big impact on this race, and Walker is already lowering expectations, which is actually a pretty smart campaign move in my opinion. Warnock has a huge cash advantage, but Georgia is one of the states the Senate Leadership Fund is redirecting his Arizona funds to. Right now, I think Warnock is the favorite to win Georgia, but Georgia is definitely in play for the GOP, and it's a state they would win if there's a red wave. In Florida, incumbent Republican Marco Rubio leads in all the polls and has more cash on hand here in the weeks leading up to the election. Even in a neutral environment, I think the Republicans should win Florida. It's a state that's been trending towards the Republicans for a while now. So, best case scenario for Republicans, red wave viewer, I would see them picking up a maximum of 54 seats, which would give them a huge edge. But even if they can get 50 or 51, that would be a big win for the GOP this November. Leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think of this map. Do you think a red wave is coming? Thanks for watching.